Hello there, you're watching the press preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Over the next half an hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the journalist and author Rachel Shabi and the Telegraph's leader writer Tim Stanley. So good evening to both of you. Nice to see you both.
Hello there.
So let's take a look then at what's making the front pages first. And the Observer goes with the growing backlash over the 1% pay rise offered to NHS staff. As does the Sunday People. It's time to pay up, Boris, is the headline there. The Sunday Telegraph writes that Boris Johnson's Europe advisor, Lord Frost, has said the European Union needs to stop complaining about Brexit and make it work. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, is leading a global push to get tech giants to pay more tax, according to the Sunday Express. The Queen won't be watching the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's interview with Oprah, according to the Sunday Times splash. And that interview also makes the front of the Sunday Mirror. It says palace aides could involve the Duchess of Cambridge in the investigation into bullying allegations. And it's fair to say the Daily Star on Sunday has a strong opinion on that interview, which will air in the UK on Monday night. We will be talking about that issue in just a moment. Rachel Shabi and Tim Stanley here with me. But Rachel, first of all, we're kicking off with a story that makes it onto a couple of the front pages of the Sundays again tomorrow. And this is the reaction to the government's proposed 1% pay rise for NHS workers, which has prompted anger amongst unions. And the Observer also suggesting that the public aren't too keen either, according to a poll. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the anger does seem to be across the board, and we've been hearing all day from nurses and other NHS staff, and as you say, union representatives across the airwaves, just talking about how this is, tipped staff over the edge, that it's just being experienced as a kick in the teeth. One union representative was saying he's never seen the public mood like this, nurses in so much despair. But as you say, the public polling that the Observer is reporting on shows a majority of all voters think the 1% pay increase for NHS staff is too low. Also, a majority of Conservative voters saying the same thing, and 35% of the public, according to the Observer, are feeling angry about it. And you can see why. The paper is also reporting that the Shadow Chancellor, Annalisa Dodds, is saying that in real terms, this has meant a £300 pay cut for nurses, particularly newly qualified nurses, and that's when you factor in things like inflation and also the freezing of the personal tax allowance, which the Chancellor sort of snuck into the budget last week, and which will put 1.6 million people into a different tax bracket. So all these things combined are obviously causing rising anger at the fact that NHS staff, which, as we know, have put themselves at the front line, have made so many sacrifices for us. They've seen their colleagues tragically lose their lives over the last year. They're facing extreme stress, fatigue, low morale, anxiety, stress, burnout, the departure rates, NHS staff who say they really want to leave as a result of the pandemic and as a result of the low pay now going through the roof. So it's a very desperate situation, and you can completely understand why there's so much anger about it.
Well, yes, and the government has said, haven't they, Tim, that they're paying what they can afford, and they will point to Rishi Sunak's budget earlier in the week, which showed the parlous state of the nation's finances. But it is politically uncomfortable for them, isn't it, to be offering such a small pay rise to these workers who, right from the very top, right from the Prime Minister, have garnered so much praise during the pandemic.
The government would also say that there are multi-year pay deals which will see NHS workers' wages rise. There is an opportunity, I think, in May for a review of this. So don't be surprised if there is a change to the 1% figure. But also don't be surprised if there is an even sooner change than that. If I was a Tory MP right now, I would not be wasting my political capital defending this, because I suspect there'll be a U-turn on it very soon, because it's so very unpopular. And because it's politically very difficult to sell to people. But the reality is that Britain is running out of money. It is running a colossal deficit. It has got difficult spending choices that it has to make. The Chancellor is already looking at tax rises, so that's being covered. There's going to be spending cuts will start to take place in 2 years' time. And because the NHS is such an enormous employer, it employs around 1.3 million people in the UK, even a 1% increase in wages, it is estimated costs around £500 million to the taxpayer. We pay that. We are the people who pay that. Doesn't mean they shouldn't get it. And I can see the arguments for it. And I understand after a year of, as Rachel put it very eloquently, all this suffering and pain, I can understand why people feel that NHS staff should be rewarded. But we pay it. And there are other things to spend money on too. And we haven't got as much money as we would like to have. And furlough's not being wound down tomorrow. The costs of COVID are going to be long term. This is the first, if you like, this is the firing shot in what will be a long battle over spending priorities for the next couple of years. The budget last week tried to level with the public, tried to be honest about the state of the finances and put things on a surer footing. But the reality is that battle has only just begun. And this is the first very emotionally difficult step in that. But we're going to see many, many more rows like this because Britain simply does not have the cash.
OK, well, go on then, quickly, Rachel.
No, I think the trouble with what Tim is saying is that has been shown to be nonsense in the year of the pandemic. So this idea that there is no money is obviously not true, because in a year when we needed to spend, the state could spend. There is a magic money tree. It's called the Bank of England. When the government borrows, it borrows from 92% of its borrowing comes from the Bank of England, which is probably the nicest and friendliest, lender you could ask for. And at the moment, rates are zero. So it's a fallacy to say that we can't spend. We can spend. We already have.
The key phrase there is, at the moment, the rates are zero. Yes, you can print the money. Yes, you can borrow the money. But what do? You devalue your currency in the long run. You create the potential for inflation. And at some point, if interest rates go up, you suddenly find yourself having to pay all that stuff off. And we don't have a magic money. Rachel touched on a very important point here. This government, this Tory government, has given the impression in the last year that there is a magic money tree. It has conjured the money out of nowhere. And that's why in the future, people are going to say, well, if you could pay for it then, why can't you pay for it now? But the fact is that money was just magicked up. It's not real money, and you can't go on doing that. The return to normal will mean a return to the kind of spending we had before. You cannot continue doing what we've done for the last year.
I'm going to move us on because there's another issue which I suspect will garner a lot of conversation, not just amongst you two, but across the country, which is picked up on a number of the front pages. Let's try and talk about this a bit before the break. Sunday Times, first of all, focusing on Harry and Meghan's interview with Oprah Winfrey tomorrow night. They are saying the Queen's not going to watch. But let's also show a couple of the other front pages dealing with this tomorrow. The Sunday Mirror, they're saying fears Kate will be dragged into Meg Bully row. And also we've got it on the front of the Sunday Express as well. Not their main story, but that picture story. Queen's mind is only on duty and Philip, they say. Rachel, what do you make of the coverage ahead of this interview?
I mean, I think that the royals and the press, the print media, really lost the plot about this. I mean, the coverage over the last few days has been near hysterical in the level of attacks on Meghan, mostly, it has to be said, and also Harry. And it's really interesting to see now the Sunday Times reporting that the Queen won't watch this programme, which we all will be watching tomorrow night. It's very much become appointment viewing.
I think we have to wait till Monday. I think it airs in America, doesn't it, on Sunday, and then we've got to wait another day in case people are already setting their
yes,
recording
for us.
Yeah, sorry,
Sunday
Rachel.
night for America. But yeah, this is the courts. This is the royal family saying, this is trivial and we want to just get back to normal and we won't indulge in this circus. But the fact of the matter is that they have been indulging in the circus. They've been leading the circus for the last few days. They've been briefing all kinds of nonsense about Meghan. So it is peculiar to now see them say, actually, we're taking the higher ground.
OK, I just want a quick thought from Tim, because we ought to be going to a break now, but I want to hear what you think as well, Tim.
I actually agree with Rachel. On the one hand, the palace is saying we're above this, we don't care, we're getting on with business. On the other hand, there is briefing against the Sussexes going on. In this country, I think the balance of opinion favours the palace and is sympathetic towards the Queen because people here generally feel that the Sussexes waltzed off into the sunset. In America, it's very different. Their sympathy is squarely on the side of the Sussexes. I suspect, however, the interview itself will be quite boring because usually when people say, I'm going to tell you my truth, it always turns out to be incredibly dull.
Well, we'll find out, won't we? Not so long to wait. OK, we're going to take a break right now. Plenty more to talk about coming up, including we've all felt pandemic-induced anxiety. Now, the Sunday Times says it's causing tics in teenage girls. We're going to be talking about that. Welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview. With me tonight, the journalist and author Rachel Shabi and the Telegraph's leader writer Tim Stanley. And Tim, we're turning to the Sunday Express next, and they have a story about Rishi Sunak. On the back of the budget, suggestions for how he might be able to raise some cash.
This is a goal of economists across the world. How do you tax the internet giants? Because while they can make massive amounts of profit, in one country, they will, of course, be physically located elsewhere. So they don't necessarily pay the usual proportion of tax on the profit they've made in that third country. So the Chancellor is reportedly going to try to get the major economies to work on a new tax system which will allow them to tax that wealth as one way of making up for the costs of COVID and lockdown. Now, that not only would make a certain amount of fiscal sense, but some people would see it as sweet justice because, of course, one group of companies that have done very well out of lockdown are the internet giants, thanks to people using the internet for things like deliveries. So this sort of makes some sense. There will, of course, be some pushbacks against it because others will point out that internet companies invest in places like Britain precisely because of the low tax regime. But nonetheless, this feels a bit like the railroads in the 19th century, like a monopoly whose time has come and who are finally going to have to start paying their bills.
Interesting one to watch. I'm going to move us on, Rachel, to a story that you spotted on the front of the Sunday Times next. And this is a rather troubling headline. Teenage girls suffer explosion of tics in lockdown. And I'm sure it'll over time, we will learn some of the costs of what's been going on behind closed doors.
Yeah, I think we're only just starting to see, tip of the iceberg in terms of the sort of anxiety disorders and mental health related issues that people have been suffering in lockdown, particularly young people. Young people, according to this research project for the Sunday Times, report to most be feeling anxiety, pessimistic about the future, and a sense of helplessness. And this is fueling, it is thought, this surge that health workers are seeing in tic disorders. So all kinds of repetitive and involuntary movement disorders, including Tourette's, but also just rolling the eyes, jerky movements, that sort of thing. Again, just incredibly sad. This is one of the sort of byproducts of the huge pressure that we've all been under, but of course can hit young people in a much more extreme way and has appeared to have done so with teenage girls, adolescent girls with these disorders.